Hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie, and today I'm going to be doing my very first game review. I just got finished with The Last of Us Part 1 last night, and I have so many freaking thoughts. I'm going to be sharing them in sort of an unscripted, random, lull, um, narrative, flowy thing. So if you want to hang out for that, I'd love to have you around. Let's get into it. So, first and foremost, I was asked a few times, how do I rank this game? What do I think about it? And I just really need to preface this review with I've never done a game review before. I've never done anything like this. So, if you have thoughts about what you'd want to see me consider in future reviews or what you thought I should have considered here, feel free to leave them down below. All I ask is that you do it respectfully because I do listen to people and we don't need to have an argument. We can have a conversation. Okay, now on to my actual review. Oh my god, it's so hard to be objective about it because there's so many things in that game that pull you in and make you feel like it's more than a game. At a certain point, Ellie and Joel stop being characters and start feeling like people you actually know. And so there's, the cinematic side of the story, which I absolutely loved. And then there's the gameplay side of the story, which I had a few more problems with. I did have some problems though too with the cinematic story, but I just want to say before I get into any problems or anything like that, this is by far I think one of my favorite stories in any game. Any game ever. I yelled that into my mic. I'm so sorry for headphone users. I don't think I've played a game that pulled me in so hard in my entire life. And I've been playing games since I was 6 years old. So it meant a lot to me. And I meant what I said when I was streaming it, which is that I think this is a game every gamer should play. I know that's kind of wild to say, but it's just so good. Um, One thing to note is that in my mind, this game has almost no real comparison. So I'm going to be comparing it a lot in my head to God of War, the most recent one, because that's really the only game that I consider to be in the same class that I've played. So I've played a lot of Nintendo games, I've played a lot of first person shooter games, but I've never really gotten into a game quite like this besides God of War. So those are my big comparison points. And I thought, well, I guess I played Assassin's Creed too, but these God of War and The Last of Us feel comparable because they are around the same length of time. The storylines were similarly, they were complex, but they were uncomplicated, Assassin's Creed, Kingdom of Hearts, Final Fantasy, those are massive games that have whole worlds for you to explore. And they take a long time, and they have the multi-part series with the overlapping stories. This game was short, sweet, to the point, what I really want in a game. It's similar to the play style of the older Jack and Daxter games, but with much heavier themes. And something that I thought it did sort of better than its main comparison point, God of War, is it didn't pull punches. In God of War, there are some significant deaths. There are, and they were impactful. But The Last of Us pulled Game of Thrones level murder scenes and deaths and things. They gave you time to fall in love with a character. I never thought I would feel the way I felt when the two brothers passed away watching a video game. It still just tears me up. That felt so real to me. I think they did a phenomenal job. And another parallel that I saw in The Last of Us and God of War was this personal growth aspect in the main male protagonist's relationships to a younger character. I thought both of them were really wonderful that way. I did see, I think, from my point of view, because I'm not a God of War lover, I haven't watched every single game. I haven't played every single game. I'm only using this one, the most recent one, as a point of comparison. Please don't be mad at me. I didn't see the same personal development in God of War that I saw in The Last of Us, because in the very start of The Last of Us, Joel is like, he feels like he's lost his entire world and he doesn't give a shit about anything. And then, you see him constantly shutting down, shutting people out, and doing it in a way that feels very real. It feels like, this could be my friend who experienced loss. This could be, me one day if I experienced loss. It felt so real. And you didn't hate him. It was really hard to hate Joel. He made mistakes, but you ultimately felt for him. Me walking into God of War, I was like, Kratos being a dick to Atreus. But they, I think, made, and this is kind of the difference too between walking into a series and playing the first game of a series. You just get the benefit of like them taking a little bit longer to introduce a character to you. I think they did a phenomenal job bringing Joel into your awareness and understanding. And then when you end and he's telling Ellie, find something to live for, you have to keep living. Life is worth living. It felt like literally we were seeing a changed man. And, he still is like cold as fuck. He's still like gonna kill people, including Marlene, who just absolutely blew my mind that he did that. I was not expecting Marlene to die. I mean, I should have seen it coming, but still, oh my gosh. So the way he changed, it felt like a movie and not like a game. And I was watching this documentary called From Bedrooms to Billions, and I was blown away by that because it was a PlayStation documentary, and part of what they were talking about is how challenging it was and how dedicated they were from moving gaming towards like something that was like niche, fun, silly, whatever, to something that made people feel things. They involved orchestras, they got people in Hollywood involved in making games for the first time, and this felt like a game where they brought all of those things they'd learned and put them in full force and effect to make a tremendous game that left you feeling so many things. And something that really struck me was that almost every chapter, I think of the game in chapters, almost every chapter of that game had a loss. It had something that hurt you a little bit, and sometimes it was a lot of it. It was a lot of hurt, but a lot of times it was just like they introduced a character to you, let you really know them, know their motivations, know what made them happy, and then they took them from you. And it was like literally every chapter except for the chapter with Tommy, when you get to Tommy's settlement. At Tommy's settlement, they sort of took a different approach, and they really let the relationship between Joel and Ellie shine. I feel like they wanted to highlight that so much that they didn't really include that big sucker punch to the gut. They left you with a little feeling of loss because you lost Tommy and that relationship that you thought you were going to have with him, and he was going to be coming with us, and you lose that hope. But I mean, removing someone you love all the time, it's just like, oh God. And then letting them stay when it comes time to highlight the relationship, it was masterful. I did have some problems with the storyline though. I know some people, if you watched my playthrough, you saw me struggle with this. I was a little bit tipsy streaming when it happened, so my brain wasn't processing things maybe as quickly as it could have. But when it came time for David's storyline to take effect, I had a bit of a problem with it. So we meet David, and he's like older dude, a little bit too nice to Ellie, a little bit like people were uncomfortable, and then he starts sort of acting like the rest of the people we've met in the game and being, aggressive. He starts being like, I'm going to take, you hostage. I'm going to do XYZ thing. And this is like not unfamiliar to us, but chat's reaction, which I think is like the game was intending to have this reaction, was to naturally jump to sexual violence and like a storyline that involved sexual violence against this young girl, Ellie. And, you know, content warning, trigger warning, I'm going to be talking about sexual violence. That was just like kind of an intro. But as a survivor, I have pretty high standards for what I want to see in media around sexual violence. I think, you know, I I don't like seeing messy or lazy or confusing discussions about sexual violence because I think it sort of does a disservice to people. And here, I think if that was the message they were intending to portray, I thought that kind of message with this storyline would be messy and sloppy because would be relying on like a natural fear of men around women. And I think that does just like a massive disservice to the audience and just creates more confusion in society because here we have Ellie who's trusting Joel, who has no reason to trust him when he is almost the exact same character David is. So, you know, it's as someone who is pretty critical of a culture that like normalizes or dismisses sexual violence, I would have liked to see that storyline be clearer, have it come across maybe better, because what was he doing with those kids? They were like, oh, he's got another pet, and it's like, what does that mean? You know, is this something that has to do with sexual violence, or is this just like you guys are saying, here's a dude, here's a young girl, you know what's gonna happen? Because I just don't like that. I think it's sloppy and creates a lot of issues and normalization around like that women should just be afraid all the time of every man. And as a woman who has a lot of fear around men because of sexual violence, it sucks. It does. So I didn't like that storyline, and I choose to assume that that's not what David was doing. You know, you saw me struggle with that while I was playing. I'm just going to choose to assume that they weren't being sloppy or lazy. But it was also a game made in like 2013, I believe. And that is before there was sort of a national cultural discussion around that stuff. So who knows, really, you know? And maybe there was something that David said that made it a lot more explicit. I didn't hear it. So, you know, maybe I just missed something. But, you know, I'm not going to be telling the developers this. They worked on this, you know, almost a decade ago. It's whatever. Just one thing that I didn't really like love in the story. And then I did find I did have so many problems with the gameplay. I thought it's kind of frustrating that they gave you the option to have all these like big weapons. You know, you were collecting weapons, you were collecting stun items, you were doing all this stuff, but you never quite had enough materials to make that like really worthwhile in any area that had a lot of enemies. Like there was no brute force option when you were trying to like make it through one of like the long hallways or to one of the objectives. So it really felt like a forced stealth game. You know, people were constantly coming in and being like, may I please give you a tip? This area, it's good to be stealthy in. And I was like, I know, I just like don't want to do that. That's not like, I'm like not a stealth player. I'm a DPS or a tank or a healer, but I'm not a stealther. So to me, being punished for my playstyle wasn't very fun. It makes sense, like, you know, not every game is meant for every person, but I wish that they had made it a little bit more possible for an average player to play the game differently than someone else. So you could have had a stealth game and I could have had a brute force game. That would have been more fun for me. So yeah, those are all my really big thoughts on The Last of Us Part 1, the remastered edition. I know, you know, some people may not love every point that I made. Some people may agree, some people may disagree. That's totally okay. Again, this is my very first time reviewing a game, so I'm sure, you know, with practice, I'll find better things to focus on and maybe actually be able to come up with a scoring system, because right now it's just sort of like I have no idea if I could even assign a numerical value to this game. I don't think I can. But I will say, again, for anyone interested, I highly recommend this game. I thought the first one was just so much fun, and I cannot wait to play the second one. The problems that I had with the storyline and the gameplay were so minor compared to the enjoyment that I had in all of the characters that you grew to love. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt. And again, I do really enjoy God of War. I know that it might not have sounded like it. I'm actually replaying it right now. And I kind of made it sound like maybe I didn't play that many video games in the beginning, but I think God of War is just the only one that came to mind as a comparison. So if you want to see what other games I have played, I have tons of highlights on my Twitch channel, and I do also have tons of other videos on my YouTube channel where you can see me playing Cuphead, Ori and the Blind Forest, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, everything. I play everything under the sun, so don't hesitate to go check out that other content. And please drop a subscribe and a like and a comment, especially if you agree, disagree, have other thoughts. What was your favorite part of the game? I would love to hear all of that. So I hope to see you around in the future, and I hope you feel comfy and safe this holiday season.